Hey everybody, it's Dan.
And this is Ron.
Alex.
And this is a nominee. Episode 28, unlike last time where I just said it was episode 28 to make sure you were all awake and paying attention.
And in fairness, it was actually going to be 28, and then we decided that the top 10 movies, we just keep it as one instead of splitting into two.
And so as a special thing today, because we have a new podcast, an unfamiliar podcast, we watched a movie about visitors. A.k.a. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which I had not seen before today. Ron, of course, had seen it multiple times and actually met the aliens.
Yeah.
I had barely heard of it.
Oh, you had barely heard of it? I know you haven't seen it.
I saw it on the top 100 list yesterday when I googled top 100 list because I was preparing myself to suggest that we look at the top 100 list for the podcast.
Oh wait, what is Alex? Alex he's not the pod. Well, a guest.
Well, he's the pod visitor.
Oh, yes.
And he showed up in a pod.
But I am wearing clothing.
Yeah.
You may not know this if you're listening to the podcast, but I am clothed.
Yeah, unlike the aliens.
He sent the right beeps and bloops to get into the control room. So here we all are.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I've seen it at least twice. I know I saw it once on TV. Again, dating myself, and then at least one on VHS. I don't think I've seen it in the theater. I'm not certain. So, what did... I can't remember the name. You told me this multiple times.
Close Encounters of the Third Kind?
No. Oh, I thought it was the fourth. No. I mean, when they show movies, older movies.
Revival Theater.
Revival Theater. Thank you. I keep forgetting that.
Or repertory cinema is another name for it.
Ooh, that's fancier.
Big fancy word for watching the actual good movies from the past.
Yeah,
they don't always show the good movies.
Yeah.
I saw Blackula 2 at the Museum of Modern Art in New York City, and that is not a good movie.
It was the Museum of Modern Art. They didn't have anything good in there.
It was revived.
Whoa.
Damn, this is...
You just dissed 50 years of art and artists.
Sponsored by the federal government. Google it.
Yeah, well, that's why I was able to get in there for free on Fridays. Well, actually, that's why I was able to get... So a lot of my film education was not having an air conditioner, living in New York City during the summer, and having a student ID that could get me into the MoMA cinema screenings for free where there was air conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I saw a lot then.
Desperate times.
Yeah.
And I saw a lot of first-run movies for the same reason, but I was paying. I'd spend half the day watching movies for the air conditioning.
Yeah,
that's good. You don't have to buy one ticket.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I mean, I'm a Gen Xer. You guys are millennials, right?
I suppose.
And it was interesting that you guys hadn't seen it, and I have. Oh, well, you know what? Should we start with the plot?
Hang on, the movie came out before I was born.
Oh, no kidding.
I don't feel bad about not having seen it.
77 or 70? Okay,
77 and then 80. So
and then Jaws is 75, right?
Oh, that sounds right. Yeah.
Really? It's amazing I've seen that. That's
because E.T. was 83, I think, so there was something in between.
Poltergeist,
right?
Okay. Okay. Jaws is 75. This is 77. Let's see. I'll just start typing for Poltergeist. How do you spell Poltergeist?
Poltergeist.
1982.
Okay.
There was a remake of Poltergeist?
Oh yeah. There were sequels. Anytime a horror movie makes any kind of money.
A trequel.
Well, there were two sequels. There was Poltergeist 2 and Poltergeist 3, but then in 2015 there was a remake with Sam Rockwell. It's worth watching just because it's Sam Rockwell.
And there was a TV series, bro. Read the entire Google.
Whoa, no kidding. And then afterwards, Bachelor Party with Tom Hanks.
Thanks, Google.
Yeah, I don't know. IMDb picked that as the last thing to show.
One of these is not like the other, ladies and gentlemen. Just FYI.
Bachelor Party might be my favorite Tom Hanks movie. F.U. Saving Private Ryan.
Mine is the TV show Bosom Buddies. Right. I think he wants to pretend it exists. Okay, Raiders of the Lost Ark was in 81. E.T. was in 82.
Okay, so
And-
Poltergeist was...
I already forget.
Poltergeist was 80, so he did like, he was a busy beaver for a couple of years.
It was prolific for like almost a decade. I mean, and that's actually just looking at those movies. There's more after. There's more Raiders films and all that.
Oh wait, and didn't like 1941 came out between those, his like failed World War II comedy?
Yeah. 1979. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh,
So that was, I guess, his follow-up to Close Encounters, technically. The same way that, like, the Star Wars Holiday Special is technically the real sequel to A New Hope,
That's
because
true.
it came out before Empire Strikes Back.
You're right. What's the name of the holiday in that?
Life Day.
Life Day. And does B. Arthur sing? I can't remember.
You could call it singing, sure.
Well, okay. Does B. Arthur say words and with music?
Yes.
Okay, all right. And she's the bartender, right?
I believe so. It's been a long time since. Oh god, next like holiday season, we should do the holiday special.
Oh, that would have been great for Christmas. Oh, President's Day. President's Day is coming up not too far. Yeah. So
Do you guys
the
want
plot.
to talk about a movie?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We'll get there eventually. So yeah, this movie. Let's describe the plot a little bit. Right. I was just saying that I thought it was interesting that you guys had never seen it. Like you said, you were born after it. Actually, you were born. When were you born?
I was born 1989,
So
like
really?
way after.
I'm older
Wow.
than your bro Dan here.
Yeah. I didn't realize that.
I mean, you look younger, but
Right. I was told I was
Oh, yeah.
25 a few weeks ago.
Well, I've looked older
You
than
were?
Ron since I was
Yes.
like 14, which is disconcerting.
Yeah.
Now my hair's falling out, so...
You've known me since I was 24. Now that I'm 25.
Right.
Yeah. So the plot. So what happens?
so you would say that there is a plot?
I would
the
totally
story. How about
say
the story?
plot. Yeah.
Let's describe what happens.
There's not like a traditional protagonist, but the plot is basically flying saucers go over some part of Indiana, I believe it is. A bunch of people see them. Some of them become obsessively concerned with this mound of mud. It's pretty clearly in tone that they're aliens. There's a nice little break in the middle where Spielberg shows this scene of basically a guy going crazy in a domestic situation that's clearly like a ripoff of Nicholas Ray's Bigger Than Life, or not ripoff, but an homage to Nicholas Ray's Bigger Than Life. And then they meet the aliens, and it looks a lot like a Daft Punk concert. That's why Truffaut's there.
And then
Just like at a Daft Punk concert.
And then the guy played by Richard Dreyfuss is the only one who actually gets on the ship because the aliens invite him. There's a whole team.
Well, right, because he can't bear to look at his kids again because of what he did. Like, he's really eager to get rid of, like, to just ditch his wife and those... And granted, those kids are pretty fucking stupid in the movie. Like, I would be...
I'd want to escape from those kids, too.
This is basically a man walking onto a spaceship not knowing anything because his kids didn't want to go see Pinocchio, and he's just like, fuck this.
This is a lesson. All the kids that are listening, okay, you get a lot of press about Santa Claus. But the original mythos included Krampus, who, if you aren't a good boy, Krampus takes you away by your ankle.
Mm.
And so this is really kind of a modern Krampus.
You know, it's funny that actually there seemed to be like a revival of Krampus in media like a few years ago, and
The sweetness of endless consumerism is finally like too much for people.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. So even Kevin Smith was involved in a Krampus thing.
Yeah, and this movie was very pioneering that's not good English, but it's a podcast.
Pioneering.
It pioneered a lot of product placement and how it works because, you know, there was this whole huge scare in the early to mid 70s about quote unquote subliminal advertising, right? Like this idea that advertising would magically become incredibly effective if it was just blinked at you for like one frame out of 24 frames. And there's a lot of shots of Coca-Cola signs that they go on for more than one. I would say they go on for probably 10 to 12 frames because it's about a half a second, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of that in this movie, which was kind of surprising. Well, not surprising because, like, Steven Spielberg, he doesn't say no to money, right? Like, if the money turns up, he doesn't have any issues with the money.
Well,
but there was, like, Piggly Wiggly, Carvel, no Cookie Puss, unfortunately, but Carvel. Baskin Robbins. Or wait, no, maybe it was Baskin Robbins and not Carvel. Yeah, I think you're right. So that would explain why there's no Cookie Puss.
So also flavor of a certain type of dessert.
We also see a shot of McDonald's. We see him, but that's actually important.
Mascot.
The McDonald's is there, but actually it's really neat. It's important because actually the lights go out when the aliens, the ships arrive, the UFOs.
I mean,
all
they
the lights go out.
they could have used. Actually, the McDonald's is bullshit because they
could have just used a diner or some kind of generic.
There's a fuck ton of diners.
Yeah.
There's a bajillion tiny diners before McDonald's takes over the country.
Like
even now, you don't see actually
complex.
that many diners, that many McDonald's like in the middle of the country. People are like doing their own thing. Who needs a corporate? Like the Walmart is at the distant edge of town. It's not in the middle.
Oh, but the McDonald's are.
Well, that's pretty.
They've taken over now. But in
huge.
'77, were they really that common? That that was the default.
No, 77 McDonald's was huge. Yeah. McDonald's was. That was when they were kind of like on their, because Carol's Hamburgers, which was one of their major competitors, had just flopped. I'm not even sure if Burger King actually existed yet. White Castle has never been aggressive about expanding, so they were never really a huge competitor. And they hadn't introduced the Happy Meal at that point, because I have that book with all the pre-Happy Meal toys.
I met Ronald McDonald and Grimace once when I was a kid. When I was like 4 years old, and the McDonald's down the street, they had a whole thing. But yeah, they had the whole thing when the characters come, the Hamburglar and stuff. Oh my god, that was so much fun. Yeah.
So is it early?
There's a whole fucking set of like this whole cast.
Oh yeah. There's Mayor McCheese. There's there's so many of them.
There's
like the bird.
Just to be clear for our podcast, none of these characters make an appearance in.
No, just the McDonald's. Oh! But we're talking about the number of McDonald's. The sign on that McDonald's says 24 million served. What do they say now? Over a billion, or
I think it's like 3 billion at
3
this
billion,
point.
yeah.
I thought it was like 99 billion. They were like, we ran out of letters and numbers.
It's
like,
a lot.
You
of
just know we've
served
a lot of hamburgers.
Yeah.
And I feel like what they definitely all of these companies paid to have these spots in this movie. They probably made. Because, like, Spielberg, that was his great innovation in movies, was he figured out how to do, like, very relatively graceful product placement, right? Because you got the Reese's Pieces in E.T.
Right.
I don't know what kind of product placements were in 1941, but nobody does because nobody watched that movie.
I've sseen it. I saw it on TV.
You did? Okay.
Yeah.
To Dan's point, nobody's watched the movie.
But yeah, and they did it in this movie, and then they were like, okay, if we put more of it in, we'll get an even better return. We just need that like winning alien formula, and that's how you end up with Mac and Me.
Right. Oh my god, yeah.
Which Alex, we covered in a prior episode.
Yeah. Episode 5.
Episode 5.
I have not seen that episode.
Oh wow, yeah.
Or that movie.
It's the greatest movie ever made.
Yeah. And it's got a 6-minute dance scene in a McDonald's.
Okay.
It's like a music video in a McDonald's.
Wow.
So,
yeah.
But
combines two things that I know and love.
Alex is a vegetarian.
Correct.
Have you ever been in a McDonald's?
I have, but the last time I was there and didn't regret it was probably when I was like 8 or 9.
Wow.
Yeah, my family immigrated to this great land. Was unfamiliar with the abundance of America, the streets paved with gold, and they were like, they serve food. It must be good food. Let's take our son to McDonald's all the time. And apparently, this had a deleterious effect on the organs that are inside of my body.
As opposed to the organs that are outside of your body.
Listen, Dan, we're not that close to discuss those organs. And so I distinctly recall, my father denies this, but I distinctly recall being told, like, hey, if you don't, there was some medicine, it was unpleasant. Alex, if you don't want that again, you can't go to McDonald's anymore. And so that was when we stopped going to McDonald's. I felt pretty good after.
Were you made to take the medicine after all, regardless?
No, the medicine was given, and then it was like, you don't want to repeat, right? So that's why we're...
Oh, gotcha. Yeah,
Apparently it was my fault that we went to McDonald's so often because I was asking to go to McDonald's. Blame the 7-year-old who knows about nutrition. I'm like, are you serious? Okay, I guess you guys loved me.
I remember as a kid, McDonald's was such an amazing treat. Well, yeah, the people and then when we lived in Israel and then we'd come visit the U.S., oh my God, we had to go to McDonald's, such a wonderful thing. And I remember...
it worked.
Yeah. Happy Meals. I can't remember. Yeah, we got Happy Meals for the toy and stuff, but not that often.
I mean, I was like into it, but then I discovered White Castle and my life changed.
I didn't discover White Castle till college.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I lived a couple blocks away from one. It was the only thing that was like 24 hours that I could walk to in less than 10 minutes because I was in Brooklyn, and I just
that rural
bucolic,
rural bucolic hills
of Brooklyn, right? And and yeah, I just really got into. Because there's like a weird vibe that you get walking into a White Castle that you don't really get walking into any other kind of fast food joint. Like there's something Twilight Zone-y about...
No, that's not Twilight Zone. That was this movie.
Listen, I learned one thing, okay?
I can't do the Twilight Zone music. How does it go?
It's not that, but it's like that. It's faster.
This movie has now erased that tone from...
Yeah. I mean, I remember...
We're sorry, Ron. We can't have you play a different tone right now.
I remember what a big deal that those notes were, even when I was, let's see, 77, I was still in Israel. So 82 to 85, when I came back and I was in middle school, like there's still stuff of that. Oh, because it would be played on TV. So then afterwards, in the next day in school, would be making that music. So and it's a John Williams score and another John Williams score, which has some iconic piece of music. Like he
was on a roll.
Oh yeah,
he like in the 70s particularly, because he did the music for Jaws, he did the music for this, he did the music for Star Wars, he did the music for
Oh, what's that from?
Star Wars.
Are you serious?
I knew that.
Oh, okay, you knew that one. But which character?
The Imperial March.
Which character?
That's only one character.
That's only one character. There's a lot of motifs like Wagner.
Never mind.
Each character or group has their own motif or situation.
See, I haven't noticed, and I feel like that in part has scarred me because I feel like my life also should have that. Like I need my theme music. I'm expecting theme music for other people, and it's like not happening.
I always have music in my head. There's always a band kid.
You might want to get that checked out. See, professional guy.
No, music is a beautiful thing.
I mean, whenever I walk into a room, I hear All Star by Smash Mouth in my head, and I just kind of assume everyone else hears it. But maybe I shouldn't have said that out loud because my bubble might be about to be burst.
Depends. Do you think you can handle the truth?
Once you say it, the music goes away, and you welcome the music. It's your theme song.
It's a cool place.
Yeah,
they say it gets colder.
I just want to make it clear: these aren't like earworms. This isn't like hallucinations. This is always like I always know or some sort of music. I love listening to music. I love I get absorbed in music.
But for some reason, when he walks into a room, all he hears is the Imperial March.
Dum 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 dum. Dum 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 da 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 dum da dum dum da 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 dum da dum dum da dum dum da dum.
See, Ron's not crazy because we all just heard that too.
Vader, I guess.
That was Vader. Okay, what? Yeah, it was Imperial March Vader. So now what's
which Star Wars character is this?
Wait, that sounds almost like the music from the Cantina.
All the
okay, shoot, I can't remember. No, I can't do it. Okay,
the screensaver is a reminder.
Yeah. What music is this? What music is this from? Dum da da dum dum da dum dum da dum. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So there we go. But no, that's what I'm saying about John Williams and his music. They're very they're pretty simple. And it's not that they're like da 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 da. If well, this one has 5 notes. But those all.
But they're the right 5 notes to communicate with the aliens.
Right.
And then there's an octave change, and then make sure. I love how the guys are really serious about the notes changing in the end. There's a lot of it. There's a lot of it included. All the scientists are like major 5th, and then an octave, and then a major 3rd, and it's like the guy who's playing the 5 fucking notes probably just like knows the notes by now. Like doesn't need and like telling him go down an octave is not going to help him find that note.
Right.
Like, really? Just tell him it's a C for fuck's sake.
But the aliens, they're playing microtones. They're not playing on a Western scale to begin with. Like eventually they come into this sound that sounds kind of like a tuba or something. Right, like they're trying to play. And it's weird because they implanted the music into these people's heads, but they have to figure out how to tune to get to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
when they're playing an electronic instrument.
But maybe the first one is just saying, "Hello, we're here." And then they slowly start talking because they start with the 5 notes. Well, the aliens actually do something a little different, and then the Earthlings respond with those same 5 notes, and the aliens do some other thing. It's from the spaceship. It's this giant mothership that is hovering over the landing area. Well, the landing area on Devil's Tower in Wyoming, and so they do a bunch of notes, and the humans respond with the same 5 notes that the aliens had implanted in people's heads, and then they respond with some other notes, and then back and forth a little bit.
The humans play the same damn 5 notes.
They do.
They can't be taught anything.
Well, but they start. So the aliens do a little bit of those same 5 notes, and then they start doing more, and the humans eventually start doing some responses, and then suddenly it breaks out into this like not on both sides, and they start learning the language.
Right.
I don't know. I still don't understand.
It felt like a jam session.
It was like a jam session. You're right.
I don't think anyone learned anything.
No, in a jam session you learn a lot. You get the people in the jam session really like get to know. They have to know what the other person is like the kind of thing that they're going to play before they actually play it, or they kind of get like just a little bit, and suddenly it's like they're talking to each other.
All right, fair enough.
I don't know.
I feel like this is the most meta
Sorry, I didn't mean to sound like
about watching movies that I've ever seen.
The most what?
The most meta movie about the experience of watching a movie, right? Because like the aliens are a MacGuffin. We don't even know if there are aliens for like 95% of the movie. We're just following these people who keep being shown in these spectation shots, right? Like half the characters we're introduced to, they don't get any lines of dialogue. We only know them through their act of engaging, or not engaging, but just sort of staring at something, kind of like we're doing in the film. They look up, because if they look straight ahead, as I pointed out when we were watching it, it would be very disconcerting and weird to the audience, right? But at the same time, like all the kind of stuff where they're talking about when they have the meeting with the government operatives, and they're like, 8 billion photographs or whatever have been taken, and we never got a flying saucer. You're all crazy, blah, blah, blah. In a weird way, because Spielberg wrote this, and Spielberg had been kind of struggling in the film industry up till Jaws, and then Jaws is this massive, massive hit. It's almost like a film about his own bewilderment about why a certain movie draws people to go look at it instead of another movie.
Wait, I don't understand.
Okay, so he hits the lottery with Jaws, right?
Right.
Because there's plenty of people that were making nature's going to kill you movies, and they didn't make nearly as much money on them as Steven Spielberg did.
Frogs, which was made I think a year earlier.
It was terrible.
Oh my god. Oh,
we did an episode on Frogs.
I think that was episode 4. That drained us.
But apparently not the swamp from which the frogs came.
But
Nice.
you have suddenly his second movie, which he writes and directs. It's about this thing going viral and inspiring this cultish devotion without really doing much of anything besides shining light in people's faces, which after all, what
That's
is
exactly
a movie?
what a movie.
That's what a movie
There's
is.
sound. Oh my god!
Right.
Well, I thought that was beautiful. I'd never noticed before until watching this. Like the dialogue is pretty sparse. There's a few bits of dialogue and there's some talking, but the movie is actually it's not silent. It's that what you hear is some of the there's some soundtrack, but what you hear is you hear music. Some of it is specifically the alien, the five notes, but mostly.
but everything else is like horror, build up, suspense, sound.
Yeah, and imagery. There's a lot with the imagery, and which is important because all these people get these images of Devil Tower before they.
I think that's possibly what puts this in the realm of classic, where like it did something interesting with the medium.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised given what I saw of Spielberg's later work, which granted I have never been particularly enthused by Mr. Spielberg, but I did enjoy this movie. Yeah, like the narrative is completely... There is a protagonist. It is Richard Dreyfuss. At the same time, he's not really treated like a traditional protagonist. I think that kind of gets to the heart of what I was saying before, that like a lot of films, you'll have an audience surrogate. You'll have a bunch of characters where they're kind of larger than life and they're not necessarily relatable, and then you'll have this character who's like a kid or something, or somebody who doesn't know the world, who has to get introduced to everything as a way to make it seem less egregious when you're just caught in exposition. So like Luke Skywalker in Star Wars, right? Or something like that. In this movie, every single character is an audience surrogate to the point where they're an audience surrogate more than they're even a fleshed out character, right? Because like when you stop to think about the Richard Dreyfuss character at all, like what he's doing makes literally no sense unless he's just sort of, right? Because like he has literally no emotional connection to his wife and kids.
He's a jerk to them. He's not a. He's kind of a. Yeah, he's a jerk.
He kind of cares about them.
Like he wants to take him to see Pinocchio because he wants to see it.
Right, and then he takes him to go see.
He wants them to like he. It's a I mean, ultimately, all of us are self-centered. So like it's through his own lens, but like he thinks this would be good for their childhood because it added to his childhood. So it kind of comes from a good place, even if it's terrible parenting.
But then he yells at them and threatens physical violence.
I didn't say he's good at parenting.
Oh yeah, they decide they want to go to wacky golf or whatever. And it's weird because that's set up. That's how we're introduced to his character. And then the very next scene where we see him, he's like physically dragging his wife and his kids to go look at this spaceship.
Yeah. And she goes, "I'm taking this well," which is accurate because she has actually come along.
It's supposed to parallel the Pinocchio thing.
Right. Oh, and when
that he does in fact drag them along to something.
And she actually, when they're out, he drags his family out to where he saw the aliens before, and they don't appear. And she says to him something like, "Remember when you used to go to Hero to places like this?" And it gets a little romantic, and they kiss and all that, and then turns around and he's looking up at the sky. He's not actually into the kiss.
Yep.
Right. In a weird way, he is sort of the like obsession with the cinema. If we're taking the aliens as this sort of metaphor for the cinema itself.
Aliens is a metaphor for the cinema.
Oh, the
rips us away from our loved ones as we are engrossed in its flashing lights and sounds.
Well, I mean, have you ever seen somebody with a phone? Like, it's not that hard to get addicted
Can't
to.
argue. Cannot argue. I am a man who, until very recently, was on a flip phone.
Literally 2 weeks ago.
I just want everyone to know that it is 2019. This recording is in 2019. And I had a flip phone until the middle of November.
And Dan, that's what Dan has. Although
mine doesn't flip.
Oh, wow.
Mine is like a lame phone. It's like somebody broke the legs off, so it's not doing the flips anymore.
It's like a BlackBerry, but the lights don't turn on when you push the buttons.
Yeah, it's like a Hackberry.
Where I have a smartphone.
I've
had a smartphone for a very long time.
Oh no, that's because it actually turned off. Okay. Now it's no, the buttons do light up.
Yeah. Okay, I figured.
This is like $15 burner phone.
Yeah. No, I wasn't being sarcastic. I mean, I think maybe there is something to the notion. What I was suggesting during the movie is something I've gotten elsewhere. So I'm gonna cite that it was not my own research.
That's fair.
But the notion that aliens in cinema, it starts to add up if you look at it as how is the U.S. relating to outsiders at any given point in time, because aliens have been in cinema for lots of years, but also the relationship of the U.S. to foreigners has changed over time. So where the aliens are coming to get us, those come out during the Cold War when we're afraid of the other, and where they are sleeper cells inside, that's its own thing. Here, it's, I don't know, you could write a little small book about it, because
I'm sure there have been a couple.
The government cares very much, but doesn't trust the public with it, and you have these experts that actually have the least amount of knowledge on the thing, least intuitive, experienced knowledge of it, whereas the people with the actual experience are being dismissed by the experts, except for that French guy.
French for
What they said.
Okay, Dan, can you tell? Wait,
well,
did we already talk about
there's a lot of confused visual metaphors in this film, because there's a shot of a helicopter crop dusting. To most audiences at that point in time, the visual analogy would be the dropping of Agent Orange over Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
You have this recreation of the Bikini Atoll atom bomb test, kind of.
Not the full mushroom, just the mushroom.
The mushroom head in the sky to announce the arrival of the aliens.
But wait, can I stop you for a moment? In the same way, it wasn't crop dusting. It was they were dropping sleeping gas.
Right.
That it was going to make them sleep for 6 hours because they didn't want the people who the 3 people who actually made it up the mountain or were starting to climb the mountain. So just thinking about what you said about Agent Orange, it's not as dead. It's not deadly. And in the same way, the mushroom cloud.
It's a really fucking close analogy because it knocks you out for 6 hours.
Right.
Well, what's death?
No. I want to compare this. Wait. Let me finish. Agent Orange's death. What they have in here is sleep. The mushroom cloud in Bikini Atoll is death. The head of the mushroom cloud that we see here is actually the aliens coming. It's scary. It might be kind of scary because but it doesn't death. If anything, it's they're meeting its life. So it's there might be somewhat analogous, but it's the end result is different. It's softer. It's not. Well, the other two are both about death, and these aren't. These
right, but even then, the way that we're introduced to the sleeping gas is seeing Richard Dreyfuss and whatever her name is driving down that road, and we see these animals just keeled over, and at least I presume they were all dead.
They said
find out later they're sleeping, I guess, so it would get because this got a G rating. This was
it was G. Oh, okay.
Well, they didn't have PG. Didn't exist. I'm pretty sure.
No, it did. I looked it up. Okay. Yeah. It was. No, wait. I'm sorry. No, maybe PG. I'm sorry. PG did not exist.
PG-13 was the one that came much later.
Yeah, PG-13 came out around 85 because we talked about this, but it came out because of Gremlins and Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, because that had a PG rating, and it was definitely on the scarier, creepier, not made for little kids version. So I'm sorry, I think I cut you off. Also, Alex, with something. I
guess the one thing I wanted to bolster what Dan was saying with the idea that death and sleep are actually very close analogy, right? Because the only difference is that you wake up from sleep. So and it's coming from a helicopter, and it's a gas, and it's so I think that's a pretty straight line.
Right. I mean, if it was actual crop dusting, they would have potentially killed them, but that's not what they were doing. They weren't trying to kill the people who were sneaking up, the people who were actually invited by the aliens.
I guess what I'm saying is in a certain story way, they were right. So the guy that's caught with inhaling the sleeping gas, he in the story-wise, he dies. Like, he's gone from...
Oh, I see.
From the rest, right?
Yeah. He doesn't
it's a long film, but it's only 2 hours. So, like, if you're sleeping, you're out. It's the same, actually. If it had been Agent Orange, right, it would have functioned similarly. He dies. Okay, it's a little bit less, make it PG. He sleeps. Basically equivalent to...
After the movie's over, we know he's going to wake up. But yeah, within the movie,
really
he's dead.
It's weird, too, because you have this giant military operation, and you never see any clear indication that anyone is carrying firearms or weapons.
There was one point when they were searching for the 3 people climbing up the mountain. It was that made it through. They were carrying guns.
Okay.
Yeah. And then they said there was like, if there's too much, they can't find them. They need at least 3 times as many people. Call it off. Send the sleeping gas.
Yeah.
But they were carrying rifles.
Okay.
Yeah. And they were in full fatigues, full army fatigues. Yeah, interesting. But it was the search party that was carrying guns.
Great.
Like, why do they need guns in a search party?
Maybe they also carry sleeping gas. I don't know.
No, but why the rifles? Because that's definitely death, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't shoot. I mean, unless they're shooting them in the leg or something, or just to scare them.
Right. There's never like an actual shot. Like that's the weird thing to me is that so we have this kind of the alien is the metaphor for the international other, as Alex said. I mean, I don't feel like Steven Spielberg is a particularly politically savvy guy, so this is probably just kind of a hopeful message of diplomacy over arms escalation, at least in his head.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems kind of weird that all this like unpleasantness about the 20th century still manages to creep in subliminally.
Uh-huh.
Which unpleasantness about the 20th century?
Well, the dropping of the atom bomb, Agent Orange.
I mean, that's all part of
helicopters, everything.
That's why the relationship with the aliens or the international other is strained. It's actually fitting that the soldiers,
the search party,
soldiers from World War II come back.
Oh, right. But they were the flyers. They were the people who were flying, and it was like it was a training mission, I think, right? It wasn't. Oh, but those. Why do they have the planes? They're probably bombers. So yeah, you're right. But yeah, they're coming. There was. Although, you know what?
So they're returned as though it's like we've finished that chapter of history.
But did you notice Did you notice the date when they disappeared? It was May 1945.
Mm-hmm.
So at least in Europe, the war was over.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, VE Day. The war.
So maybe it was the beginning of the Cold War because didn't that like the day after?
It did signal the beginning of the Cold War. The war with Japan did not end until August.
Okay.
But they were Navy, but they were Navy, so maybe that was still.
So a plane at that point may have been reconnaissance, which is still, which you're like, oh, it's just reconnaissance, but it's like, if Russia was flying a spy plane over your house, you would feel differently. Well, you wouldn't be like, oh, they're just reconnaissance, right? No, it'd be like that's foreign aggression.
Not yet. They were allies at that point. They would not have been shooting at each other. They were about to get to that point, but they hadn't yet. I mean, they were allies of convenience.
Mm-hmm.
But the Russians weren't the scary one at that point. It was Germany and the Axis power was Germany and Japan, and their allies. So
it's very interesting to me too that the two major. I
was going to say sorry. I keep wagging because I'm doing when I'm.
No. You're trying to finish a point.
Yeah. But in '77, it is definitely the height of the Cold War. It's the Soviets versus the U.S. And '77, I can tell you, I was scared. I was, I say we talk about the 50s or 60s or so as the height of the Cold War. It was still going on, and then when Reagan 80s. I mean, at least early on, that was scary. It was still scary because it seemed like there was going to be an escalation again. But yeah, 77 was scary. The world could end a nuclear holocaust. Not that it can't end now, and it's probably potentially worse. But
may have been closer to the trigger then.
It was probably closer to the trigger. It was closer to the trigger. It seemed like something more immediate. Whereas I don't feel in the same way. I don't feel like it's more immediate. I don't think every day like, oh my God, is the bomb going to drop? I don't know. How do you feel? I think
it's been normalized.
Yeah. So there's two correlated but independent things. Is like, what is the actual risk of nuclear annihilation, and how much nuclear annihilation risk do we feel?
Right.
So I think we definitely feel less. Is the risk lower?
Climate change is...
Yeah, there's like a bigger, badder extinction threat on the block. Granted, I don't think a lot of people think about how the nuclear proliferation risk plays into climate change, but that's a whole other conversation.
The doomsday clock has moved back closer to midnight.
Right, but again, like, that's a bunch of scientists with a paper clock. Like,
right. We're not thinking about it.
Is that how people actually feel? I think people generally don't feel that concerned about nuclear annihilation.
Yeah.
Where does the risk stand? I don't know. I'm not a geopolitical expert.
Very possible, at least in terms of nuclear war, if you have major powers that have nuclear stockpiles with extremely emotionally immature and or politically unsavvy leaders, aka literally the situation we're in right now, then you have shortages of resources that create desperate measures, aka what climate change is going to do when the crop yields start to go down. The idea that, say, like the US or the USSR could just nuke somebody to say, like, oh, I'm the wild card, I can maintain hegemony by acting like a crazy person and getting everybody to want to negotiate with me is not really that far-fetched, particularly given the kinds of leaders that people are actually seem to be attracted to in the moment we're facing. The point I was going to make about the movie is that
occasionally we get to the movie.
was that it's kind of weird to me that both times that were shown, or the first two kind of metaphoric examples of meeting the alien that were given both involve loss of a child.
Right, we see a child getting abducted.
Right,
what's the second one?
The second one is that the guy goes crazy and then his wife takes the kids away and he never sees his kids again because he goes on the spaceship.
Oh yeah, he leaves his family. Yeah,
right.
Well,
he leaves the family behind. He doesn't think about them. He's thinking.
You know what, Ron? He lost them before he lost them.
That's true. Yeah.
But actually, like, the thing he's looking for,
he drove him away.
And there's some conversation in this film. But
I mean,
there are some key conversations.
Different than what Alan Watts actually did to go study Buddhism. Like, Alan Watts never met at least one of his children until they were adults. They did LSD together once or twice, and then he never met him again.
They're only good for LSD. That's what I'm told.
Yeah.
There's all of the conversations between our protagonist and anyone else are really strained, terrible conversations. Like, they're not received. Like, they're on two separate tracks. Like, even at the very beginning, he's looking for understanding from his wife. She doesn't deliver. Then again, he may not have been the perfect husband up until that point in time, but that's the thing he's yearning for, which is just completely ordinary and human, even in the extraordinary circumstances. She's already freaked out about it, can't handle it. I mean, so clearly they need couple therapy, but like that, there's not time. Despite the long running time, there isn't time for that. Then he's in the shower, and she's like, "Oh, open the door," as though she will come in and connect. And very quickly, it turns into the exact opposite. She's locking him out of the bathroom.
Yeah.
So, like, attempts to reach out are shut down, which is, I don't know, also kind of a thing you see with the aliens, right? Is like, they're attempting to reach out, and do we let them in, or do we bring a lot of guns? Like, there's a lot of movies about aliens, right? And like, so often a lot of guns involved because we don't trust them, or we think they're gonna kill us, or we gotta kill them. Or
it's interesting because the way you're describing it is somewhat sympathetic towards Richard Dreyfuss, or towards the character.
Yeah, I'm a little bit crazy, and I'm looking for understanding.
Yeah. But this
well,
on this showing.
Wait, let me finish. Cry for help at one point,
multiple times.
Yeah.
But this is the first time I've watched this, or I've watched it several times. This time I've watched this, I've never been as unsympathetic to him as I have. Well, this time I was noticing like what a jerk he is, and how he mistreats the rest of his family. I'm sorry, you were saying something.
Which is maybe why his reaching out is not received.
Right.
He didn't have a good situation before. It wasn't a great, healthy relationship before, and so now he needs it, and it's like, nope, you're in a hole by yourself.
You're right. He was reaching out. He was trying to get her to understand something that he himself didn't understand. He knew what he was trying to do, but he didn't understand why he was doing it and what it meant.
Right.
And he needed help. He wanted help. He actually said something about getting therapy, and then the next day he starts throwing the plants and the soil through the window so he could build what turns out to be Devil's Tower, but so he could build a big giant version of it. But suddenly he was like, no, I'll show you. It's all great. It'll explain everything and all that.
But
and that's when
the movie vindicates
once again with like the reaching out and the like blowing up and doing the exact opposite.
Right.
I'm not saying that he's sympathetic. I'll concede, right? So like you can reach out and also have been a jerk.
Yeah,
these things are not in conflict.
Well, it's clearly a depiction of like mental illness, and that's why I brought up Bigger Than Life at the beginning of the show, because that's kind of like, for me at least, that's the ultimate depiction of male parental mental illness in the U.S. cinema. It was the movie that Nicholas Ray made, I believe, either right before or right after Rebel Without a Cause. And who's the star in that? But it's framed very similarly. He doesn't like start throwing
plants through a window.
What
about bricks?
No brick, but he's kind of he seems menacing. He seems in his wrong mind. He does seem like a threat to the children. And to Spielberg's credit, there is a certain sense of threat and menace to those sequences. Like, you can understand why the mother is taking the children away because they're not safe around this guy. At the same time, after kind of building this fairly resonant, I don't want to say realistic, but somewhat more psychologically geared towards realism than most other sequences in the film.
Which film?
In Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the Richard Dreyfuss character when he was throwing we should watch Bigger Than Life. It's a great movie. But
by the way, I checked. It's 1956, a year after Rebel Without a Cause.
Yeah. So, but then he's vindicated because he's the only one who knows where the aliens are going to show up. He's the only one that the aliens invited that makes it. He's sort of this, like, I don't want to say like Jesus figure, but he's a chosen one, which sends this very weird mixed message about this depiction that's clearly based on like toxic, untreated mental illness earlier in the film.
I don't think it's mental illness.
Well, it's not mental illness because he's vindicated at the end of the film, but like every painting is ultimately a portrait of something, right? And
he's obsessing over this image that he kind of gets out of nowhere. It's not a hallucination.
He has extreme mission-oriented thinking, kind of like somebody with like in a bipolar manic fit almost.
Yeah, okay.
And that seems to be like, that's definitely how Dreyfuss is playing it in the scene.
Right. It's a bit of psychosis.
Yeah.
That's
right. But like, I don't know. I mean, maybe there's authors that say they've written a book in 2 days. And if that doesn't take that kind of focus, I don't know what the fuck writing is. Well, right? Like that would take a sort of manic state. But I think his insanity is from the society that he's in. It's not him being insane. It's the society he's in is going to treat him as insane. It's going to have. It reminds me of the line like those that make reform impossible make revolution inevitable. If there's no room for the weird, the strange, the unexpected, if conformity is the only way, then the only way something else can happen is through such a drastic break as building Devil's Tower in your living room. If she could have said, if the model train tower could have been an outlet, maybe those plants wouldn't have been thrown through the window. Because, they're not thrown with malice, right? He isn't actually a threat to the kids. She doesn't understand.
He's neglectful. You can tell,
lots of neglectful dads stay neglectful.
So he's shoveling the stuff out of the wheelbarrow. The kid puts his hand in, and you can tell that if the kid... And I was just like, how fucking stupid are all the kids in this movie, right? Because the kid puts his hand back in for a half a second. Because he's like, oh no, Dad's not going to chop off my fingers by,
putting the shovel...
plowing the shovel.
Yes,
and it's clear that if this fucking kid doesn't get his hands away from that fucking wheelbarrow, he's going to lose his fingers to this
Dad's
Yeah.
oblivious to him. Yeah.
Dad's completely oblivious that these kids exist.
Yeah.
That's not malice. That's negligence.
Yeah.
All right.
I'll
But
concede.
it's
He's in his
not
own
good
world.
parenting, yeah.
Sure, but there's a lot of terrible parenting that goes on, and lots of that produces many children. Like it's
Mm.
that's
In fact-
okay. Like it. Well, I don't know about okay, but like that's a normal course of human affairs.
One of
The unusual
what-
thing is what he's obsessed with.
Well, early on, when we first see him, it's his son comes up to him. He wants help with his math homework, and Richard Dreyfuss shows him. He tries to explain something, but he's a jerk about it. So he's actually sort of he's agreeing to help, but so he's not malicious. He's actually helping. It's just the way that he goes about it.
He's just not good at it.
Yeah, yeah.
You can be a bad dad, but still want to dad somewhat.
And he's not sympathetic to his kids' need because he does it in a really nasty way. He's not sympathetic to the movies that they want to see. He demands that they watch what he want to see. So he's not trying to hurt him in all this. But I'll say in terms of in that way the example I'm giving, that's not negligence per se, but he's ignoring their desires, their wants,
Right.
and to some degree their needs. Yeah.
Right.
And then if the aliens are kind of taken as a metaphor for, let's say, the future, because we're kind of going through what is every metaphor that the aliens,
Sure.
then he's leaving society and the structure of the nuclear family behind for some kind of vague concept of the future. That's kind of and also given like socially what was going on at that point, the kind of collapse of community organizations that's documented in the book of Bowling Alone and a lot of other sociology books. It's kind of a weird message to send, and I think on some level Spielberg realizes that's the message he's sending, because he tries to kind of have it both ways by having the mother-child reunion paired directly with this guy getting on a spaceship so he can abandon his domestic life entirely.
I wonder if it's got something to do with the New Age movement. Wasn't that?
Oh yeah, that was very because the rise of the major cults in the United States that got any kind of prominence, like a lot of them have their early roots in the mid-50s, but cults as we think of them, as opposed to like agrarian kind of alternative societies as they sort of were in the 19th century, mostly comes out of the introduction and mass production of psychedelic drugs in the late 1960s, early 1970s. That's when Scientology actually starts getting a foothold. Children of God, that's when they get all their people. The 12 Tribes Commonwealth, that's when, and a lot of these places or these groups, they would get most of their members by essentially offering free social services outside of things like Grateful Dead shows. You get because like the LSD was originally conceived of as like first a truth serum, but then it makes you very suggestible. If you're on LSD and somebody like tells you like a really terrible idea, you have this strong set of emotions going through you. You connect the bad idea with like, whoa, and Americans in particular, I feel like have this, they live under this fallacy that, oh, I felt something intensely emotional in response to this thing that happened, ergo it must be true and meaningful, which is not really the case with a lot of things in life, I feel like. But yeah, it makes it very easy to, somebody's freaking out on LSD, they're in the medic tent at the Grateful Dead show, and then you're like, hey, is modern society giving you stress? Come do free labor for being on a farm in the middle of nowhere. And yeah, so that visibly would have been, it would have become much more visible by like 1977, because that was sort of the peak of when the fallout from the more self-obsessed Fritz the Cat-like things in the hippie movement happens. And that's when a lot of like because there was a reason that Gen Xers hated the fucking baby boomers, because they saw them as essentially negligent and self-centered, because they were kind of self-absorbed, because they were this they were this generation that they managed to be born right after the war, live through this giant economic boom, and they just never really had lived through any particular hardships. So, and they did so in the United States in this culture that is obsessed with this idea of individual genius and negating society as a way of proving your worth to society paradoxically, right? Like the, purposeful disruption thing that's been sort of ritualized in the tech industry. And I mean, there's examples of that going. Richard Dreyfuss in this movie essentially is an example of that, right? He's the only guy who knows the truth. He proves his valor by abandoning society in favor of his own whims. That was a long tangent, but
no, it was all part
completely related.
So in all this, we're all the stuff that we're talking about, the analogies and the Cold War and society and all that. It's also a movie about aliens and UFOs and meeting aliens. And that was a big, UFO sightings were huge. Everybody and his brother and sister and mother and the sister,
any other relations?
Yeah, and their sisters and their cousins and their aunts. You probably don't. That's a Gilbert and Sullivan reference. Sorry. And so to his sisters and cousins and aunts. Yeah. But UFOs were like everywhere. And the idea that there's extraterrestrial life was big. It was prominent. I don't think in a way that it is now. Sort of like the Cold War. I don't think it is now. So that was a really big deal there.
It started up again.
Really?
Just like a year ago. Yeah. So there was one author whose blog I follow, John Michael Greer, and I think he's published a book about it. About compiling information about UFO sightings and how the pattern of the lights that people reported seeing lines up really well with whatever spy plane the military was testing at the time that is only revealed 20 years later.
Okay.
So when it was a big triangular one, the Black Hawk, whatever, SR-77 that goes Mach 5 or whatever, and that's the shape of the lights that people saw.
Okay.
And in fact, the Army had planted stories of UFO sightings to put it in people's minds that that's what it was, because then when people would see the thing and they would say, oh yeah, I saw that would then be discredited.
Yeah.
Thus, information about the spy planes would not get out. That was the thinking. And so it's an example, but at the time, people ended up on polar sides, right? You'd have the quote-unquote scientists, and I'll explain why they deserve quotation marks at this point, the quote-unquote scientists saying, nope, it's unreasonable that anything like that would exist or be there, like you must have been high, you must have seen a plane. You had the people who were like, I definitely saw a UFO, and I say the first group was unscientific because the scientists wouldn't jump to a conclusion of what it is or it isn't, right? You would be in between. You would say, well, what did you see? What's the evidence? What else can we put together with, how can we correlate it and figure out something else?
Right.
But so it's a kind of, so recently the military's testing some other new spy plane and there's some mumblings of UFOs again. So it's funny, it ain't over.
But from the people's perspective, and this is maybe, well, I wanted to say the audience's perspective, but from the side, not from the side of the military and the military planning spy stories, there are, a lot of people believe that UFOs were signs of extraterrestrial life, and they're maybe looking for it or afraid of it, and people talking about, would they be hostile or would they be friendly? But people wanted to know about aliens, abductions. People really believed that they were abducted, and then it's a question: do you believe or not? So whatever might be going on, that it turns out it is a spy plane or something like that. You still have the people believing this. So regardless of the story behind it, what's actually happening, and that's what I'm saying. The people going to watch this, they wanted to see a movie about aliens because their aliens are in the zeitgeist. I used a big word, zeitgeist. Yeah, I didn't say moral turpitude. rated this time.
I don't know if that'll come up.
But no, it won't come up this time. There was,
you give us some popcorn. It's really good popcorn.
This joy can be yours. Yeah, you have to bring locally grown organic popcorn.
yeah, can you describe the popcorn? It was really good. It was really good, I got to tell you, but it was
it
neat.
was amazing.
All right, so once upon a time, you drove past the cornfield, you saw a really tall corn stalk, and it had husks of corn on it. That was growing regular sweet corn. Now, what I brought was something similar but totally different. Inside that husk is popcorn. It's an ear of corn, just like any other ear of corn. It looks like an ear, with a lot of kernels on it, but these kernels are hard and orange.
Yeah, it was weird, actually. So he first showed it, and it just looked like, oh, it's corn, but it's orange. And like until I held it, and like, oh my god, that's as hard as a rock.
Yeah, it looks like a stage corn, like a prop.
Yeah,
because it's hard, and I would think it's hard plastic, but considering that we ate it, and honestly, we had like 3 unpopped kernels in there. Like this was top-notch stuff, and it had been sitting on my shelf for a long time. I'm embarrassed to say, but like it actually popped really well.
Wait, so where's this grown?
Stearns Organic Farm in Framingham, Massachusetts.
Oh, okay.
We'll throw in the plug. Completely shameless. Callers are standing by. Summer shares available now.
Yeah, like if Spielberg
Get your
can do
veggies.
it, like nobody's really gotten the product placement thing quite right in the podcast yet. So
local organic popcorn,
like pop space corn.
Send me food and I'll spoil what you're going to send all your co-op people over the summer on the show.
So coming back to the UFO phenomenon, so the people that have seen them,
right?
I guess what I'm saying is like at the time they were dismissed angrily by the government, quote unquote, the experts, quote unquote.
Right.
But actually, that was, in the interest of knowledge, in the interest of what is actually true and understanding the world around us, that was misplaced. Like that was inappropriate. And so we see that pattern in this movie as well, right? It's like the experts are on it. They want everyone else out. A different culture may have experienced these aliens differently. They may have been more accepting around, in India, there's like 3,000 people chanting.
Right.
That's actually where they get the music from, right? Is a culture that actually accepted this unusual, unexpected, not conforming message. In America, a guy goes crazy, his wife leaves him because he wanted to make a fucking sculpture. Although it could have gone differently.
Well, when I first saw him in the bathroom and everything was colored red, I thought he'd made a suicide attempt at first.
Yeah. How is it all red? That's just weird lighting.
Right. It's very suggestive mood lighting.
Can you imagine if the music in that scene just like cut and then his wife just like flipped on the white lights? She'd be like, bro, what's going on? Can we talk? Like, again, are
you jerking off in the shower again? Like, I know that we have enough kids, but I feel alienated.
I want to kiss you some more.
Let's go to the makeout point.
And you can ignore. We can make out while you look up at the sky.
You don't have to think about me while we make out. You can think about aliens.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that it was kind of interesting too because there's a lot of that sort of the TV acting as a Greek chorus in the film.
Oh yeah.
The soundtrack is very cluttered. Whenever you hear people speaking, there's pretty much always some other noise going on. So much noise, especially for like a big commercial movie. Usually you don't have a lot of overlapping speaking.
The very first scene, right, where he's talking to his wife. His older kid is bashing a plastic doll against a playpen for 3 minutes straight.
But it's so realistic.
Are kids always doing that though?
Well, no, but you have, there's noise. It doesn't have to be bashing the doll,
happens, but it's
he just like fucking dismembers that doll by bashing it against the side of the plate. Like that was a little disturbing.
By limb.
Oh yeah. And
the leg comes off, the arm comes off. Like that's not a daily thing, Ron.
And different. Okay, it was slightly.
My younger sister used to make decapitated Barbie earrings for friends, so I don't know. But she was older than that, though. And she wasn't like it. She was methodically doing
Dan's like,
it.
she was 25, but
She might still be doing it for all I know. But,
Listen, if you have a hobby you love, why stop?
yeah, and I mean, like, decapitating the Barbies like a Barbie head on your ear. Yeah, the fact she would paint the blood with nail polish on afterwards on the neck is a sign of dedication to craftsmanship. Maybe that guy could have instilled that in the one kid if he hadn't left to go meet the aliens, but we'll never know.
Yeah, but that marriage was on the rocks before the movie started. One thing I'm recognizing that we're already an hour into this podcast, and I have not yet mentioned the Call of Cthulhu.
Oh yes.
Right.
Okay, this is great.
So I don't know if you guys thought that this was like a sci-fi movie, but it was like 90% Lovecraftian psychological thriller.
How so?
So, and here's the embarrassing part. I've only read The Call of Cthulhu. So, calling something Lovecraftian by me is really, an act of hubris. But I'm pretty sure this is Lovecraftian. So, in a Lovecraftian book, you have, and I mean, it's old, okay, so it's racist. But you have the wrong people. The dirty, unwashed, black cultists. And they are sensitive. They're picking up the vibes of something untoward, something not of this world, not of this time. Cthulhu or his siblings, distant or close. And then you have the good people, the buttoned up professors, white, elite, whatever. And so the story, for example, is sometimes around one member of that, normal good people class getting kind of curious about the wrong stuff and finding out a little bit too much about it and going crazy. And so the people that are having visions and then needing to express them, whether through sculpture, as recommended by the protagonist, or art, as by that other lady.
Sculpting.
Huh? Yeah, try
You literally said it.
Again, in India, they pick up the sound, right? All those people that are in the helicopter, we don't know what they've done or like what they've seen, but like they've been touched somehow by some experience that is not of this world. So like, whereas if the aliens are just regular material others, we may have feelings about them that are, our internal shadow projected onto them, but like you don't have visions about the Soviets.
Right.
Like you have opinions, you have thoughts, you have fears.
You have ideas,
but you don't have like psychological visions. So there's a
and if you
psychological thriller to this. I feel like it's not the right word.
No. Well, and if you do,
it's not like a horror movie, right? Like horror movies are probably the place in like quote unquote genre cinema where sound is employed most aggressively as a tool to create meaning or establish. Like it's one of the only places where you're going to have like they're not going to show you the axe going down. You're just going to hear the sound. And
because it's frankly scarier.
Like a Persona movie.
It's frankly scarier to see the splash from the axe than to actually see an axe in a person. I've stabbed myself with a knife once, like by accident, and I was like, "This is alarming," but
but not
I
scary.
think I'm going to need a Band-Aid for that. But it's not terrifying like a horror film.
The scariest part.
It was like shock. It was just like surprise. I was like, I didn't think flicking that butterfly knife in that way would leave it stuck in my thigh, but okay, that shouldn't be there.
But the scary part is all the blood squirting out of there.
Yes, the anticipation and also you imagining something far worse than reality.
Yeah. Although, so this movie it has some moments that are there's not only the tension, it's a little scary. Like say towards the beginning when you got the little kid sleeping in the room and suddenly everything's quiet and suddenly the record player starts playing and there's the little monkey with the cymbals that starts banging and all the toys, the cars start flashing their lights and going across all on their own. That's like, oh my god, this is really freaky. This is the same guy that made Poltergeist a few years ago.
Oh, yeah, and it's like totally a dry run for Poltergeist. That and the scene where the lady loses her kid. It also reinforces that feeling of our things have agency outside of us that may well be sinister as kind of a counterpoint. And also, I think to go back to the Lovecraft thing, it's very interesting to me you brought up the Lovecraft thing because I was watching this interview with Alan Moore from I think like 10 years ago on YouTube. I forget which. I I think I might have sent that one to you, but he's talking about Lovecraft. He's talking with this guy who wrote a book about the culture of the 20th century. And Moore is convinced that Lovecraft was one of the only guys who kind of foresaw the issues that would come with the collapse of the social structures that collapsed under the weight of the modernist project. So like the kind of metaphorical death of God, the complete rejection of the esoteric in favor of the rational and science, whereas esotericism has been incredibly present in most societies for most of human history, even if it doesn't necessarily help you come to empirical understandings or knowledge of things. It seems to suggest some sort of deep psychological need in people, and I think that's a lot of where the UFO thing comes from, or the sort of people wanting to believe that there's something outside of rationality. There's something outside of, because like in a science-based society, in theory, you're not supposed to, science is culturally could be defined as the hope that you can eventually understand everything from at least a cause-effect perspective. And I think like the Call of the Cthulhu, that's like, it's Lovecraft being afraid of the future, being afraid of progress, progress as we would define it, being very racist, because he embodied a lot of the prejudices of his time. They come through in the work, but he sees that despite what we gain in these things, there's going to be some kind of major reckoning if there's literally no plan or even acknowledgement that this major social function is being ignored for a very long time.
Strongly suppressed. Like we do our level best to demonize and
so the UFO becomes like this sort of this religious yearning that doesn't have a social place to take some kind of real form. And
maybe
it
a lightning
also
rod kind of drawing it out.
Yeah, like in the fact that he goes towards, in the aliens in this weird way, because they're naked, they look more primitive than the humans. We're not really, they almost have this sort of like Adam Eve rejection of technology in human society aspect to it, because because we're literally seeing people reject human society to go to the aliens. And B, because everything involving human society of 1977 that we've seen so far in the film has been this kind of horrific, all technology, like I said before, it has this agency. This agency is sinister and alarming, and we don't understand it. We don't have control over it, and it's just going to sort of run over us. And so I guess if there is any kind of like I don't want to say religious, but like
spiritual,
prophetic vision, I guess maybe with that the Dreyfus character is having, it relates to essentially this discomfort with technology and the strictures of rational society. We also see that the government, because rationalism as a basis for a society can only work if the majority, or like a super majority of the population, has this borderline religious faith in the good faith of experts and authority figures, because like you can't possibly know every branch of science to the point where you can verify claims. If everybody starts rejecting the idea of authority or expertise, the entire thing can just collapse in on itself very easily. I don't think Spielberg is necessarily suggesting that, but I mean, recent events would definitely suggest that. Like, I think there's definitely a collapse of rationalism in the United States because of, but there is that kind of like, we can't trust the authority figures. We can't trust the government because the government's lying about there being this nerve toxin so that they get to choose who gets to meet the aliens, right?
Well,
it's not like we have no examples of the government lying to us.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, it was like I don't know if the Tuskegee experiments were public knowledge at that point in time, but like there's plenty of other examples, right? Yeah.
I guess I would take issue with the notion that society has to have blind faith in experts to what? Like, to what aim? I think it can be a healthy democracy even without that. With people taught civic engagement and like that actually happening, then people can like question policies and people are not that dumb. Like they will, they'll look at a policy and like there's a common notion. There's a common notion that there are some people in this country that vote against their interest, and it's like, are they really that dumb, or are you misunderstanding their common interest? Because in general, people can make heads or tails of how your proposal is going to change their lives and whether they care about it and whether they're for it or against it. So I think we could, certainly, like, there was more civic engagement and, like, groups that, chewed on it and thought about policy and came up with direction, and I think that resulted in a much stronger democracy with a better foundation. I think that's eroded for sure. But I think actually part of the thing that's eroding it is the notion that we have to trust the experts, because then that takes the agency away from everyone else, and democracy is ruled by the people. So if you say, oh, no, it's got to be the experts, well, those experts everyone has their own bias, and so by letting everyone vote, then at least all the biases are on the same level playing field. If you say, okay, no, just the experts get to make the decision, well, they also have biases. They are not equally spread geographically and socioeconomically and ethnically throughout the country, so that's not going to produce your best outcome. Well, it'll produce something that works for the experts, okay, and for everyone else, maybe not so much.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is, like, it takes a very long time to get a PhD in something to where you, like, understand it on, like, a fundamental level where you can, because, like, sure, I could explain to you how say, a vaccine works. Mm-hmm. I'm going to give you the rote explanation that I got in school or off of Wikipedia or something.
I read it.
I trust that explanation is correct because, again, I've not seen anybody with smallpox in my life. At the same time, on a deep, like, if you ask me anything beyond that explanation, mm-hmm. or, if you presented, say, a study or something that
described a different cause to lead to that state. Like you said, you've noticed an effect. Nobody with smallpox. And you're saying that you believe the cause is vaccine. There may be a counter theory that says, yes, that's the effect, but the cause is something else.
Right, but the thing is that on some level, I do have to make a leap of faith because you hit that kind of David Hume level of, like...
Right. You can't research, like you can't do 1,000 hours of research into everything.
Right.
There will be limits, but there's also going to be limits to, like, how much you care or, like, what's at stake, right? Like, if someone is insisting on some global medical procedure that is required for all human beings and it's, like, 30 immunizations, maybe you say no. Maybe you say, hey, we all need to do a lot more research and we don't have time for this and this is unreasonable and you haven't presented the case that this is completely foolproof.
Well, but I think
so, like if that's at stake, you do the research, whereas if it's something smaller, maybe you do less, right? Like,
for a
you
lot
would have
of
a hard time proving to me that the world is not flat.
Like,
we accept it.
Science allows for creature comforts, but science also displaces man from his perceived place at the center of the universe, and I think that's psychologically uncomfortable for a lot of people, right?
I think that's actually the main thing that Lovecraft was going on about, is that, and I can't remember if it's in the opening lines of The Call of Cthulhu, but like the first couple paragraphs are like, how does it go? It's like, thank goodness that human perception is so narrow, that God forbid we would, the day will come that science makes us aware of how minuscule and infinitesimal we are in this great vast darkness. And I was pointing this out to Ron and Dan as we were watching it. There's a lot of shots that show a spot of light and a lot of darkness in the film, particularly at the end with the aliens. Right. And so I think that's an important visual to catch, where it's like a spot of very well illuminated light where the humans are hanging out and like everything else is pitch black, and the universe is like that, right?
Right, it's almost like a Plato's cave thing.
Yeah, there's a bit of that
image. Yeah.
For all intents and purposes right now, the rock we are on, this one, terra firma, Mother Earth, is the only place inhabitable in this solar system, in this universe. Good luck getting to another galaxy. Like, it's going to be a while. So, like, for all intents and purposes, this is our rock. This is our spot of light in a sea of darkness. And similarly, you know, our city is carved out of the dark wilderness. You know, there's a spot of light on the ocean liner in the middle of a vast ocean. So it's like, it's kind of a fitting analogy. So, yeah, so I think Lovecraft was saying, like, science is going to show us that we are this tiny speck, and then we're, like, not going to be doing so good.
So I found, here's Call of Cthulhu.
That's exactly
PDF.
it, the very first line.
Do you want to read what you were...
Well, if you guys aren't sick of hearing my voice, sure. The most merciful thing in the world, I think, is the inability of the human mind to correlate all its contents. We live on a placid island of ignorance in the midst of black seas of infinity, and it was not meant that we should voyage far. The sciences, each straining in its own direction, have hereto caused us little harm, but someday the piecing together of disassociated knowledge, like a sculpture and a painting, will open up such terrifying vistas of reality and of our frightful position therein, that we shall either go mad from the revelation or free from the deadly light into the peace and safety of a new dark age.
Thank you. You know,
right, the dark age thing does seem to be happening. Like, I get more and more... Every day I feel more and more like we're basically monkeys that got handed very big, dangerous toys.
Yeah.
I was going to add something that's...
Well, I just want to say, so actually when you were reading that, you both kind of laughed a little bit at two parts. I don't know if you remember what it was. I was curious why you were kind of laughing. Mm-hmm. I was very soft laughed. It wasn't big. Do you remember which it was?
No, do you?
No, I don't. Darn. I didn't want to stop you and say, like, wait, why is that funny? So,
all right, we'll play the tape.
Yeah. Oh, that's true.
Yeah, I mean, man was not supposed to, like, paddle far or something like that. I thought that was a funny image.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't
paddling.
So it wasn't the idea behind it. It was just the image itself.
I guess I was laughing because, like, I had just said that, and I'm like, oh, I guess good thing I cited my source. I'm just basically repeating it word for word.
So, but it wasn't making fun of what Lovecraft was saying or anything. It was
I think I was laughing at its correlation with what we had.
I think the social place of laughter. Like, I was watching this video yesterday where it was an FBI body language expert, and he's saying, like, a lot of times when you cross your arms in a conversation, people take it as you being standoffish, say, when really it's basically a way of hugging yourself or self-soothing most of the time.
Oh, interesting.
And I think the sound of laughter, because we have this deep emotional connection to the sound of laughter, people that kind of, like, we always say laugh nervously, but I think there's other places the laughter can come from. It is kind of like a self-hug or some kind of, like, way of reassuring the self when faced with something uncomfortable or maybe,
I totally agree. So actually, I was watching myself, because I do this in general, and I watch myself because I was hugging my arms, and I was also crossing my legs a little bit.
Rubbing your leg is another one.
But actually, now that you said that, I'm going back and crossing my arms, because it does feel like a self hug. And when I do
a hug,
and when I do, like, sometimes I'll giggle a bit, or when somebody says something.
Don't let me stop you.
When somebody says something, I do need hugs. I need hugs.
We can pause this, you guys.
It's our annual hug drive.
Well, I'm hugging myself right now, so very, very, very. Here, I'm going to give a bigger hug. There, I'm giving myself a bigger hug now. No, but actually, I'll giggle a little bit, but it is a bit of a nervous giggle, because, like, somebody's telling me something, it might be kind of serious, or I'm trying to absorb it, and it's not that I'm trying to distance them. It might come off as distancing or demeaning, when in fact I'm actually just, it's myself. I'm feeling a little nervous. It's a nervous giggle, because I'm feeling a tiny bit nervous. I'm like, and it's a way for me to help absorb the information.
Anyway, it's also like a very active way of saying in a conversation, I'm listening, I'm responding. Because if you just say okay, that's
Yeah.
kind of like a flat, like the person isn't getting that extra kind of bit of approval. And especially if you're trying to get somebody to keep talking, laughing a lot is a great way to like conduct. Well, okay, so my first movie, it's all those interviews with those people, and they're talking about like horrific things. Like the first guy's talking about, my dad tried to kill my mother by driving her into a tree with a car with no seat belts. And you can hear me, I'm doing this like Beavis and Butthead chuckle throughout the entire interview.
Jesus.
And it sounds horrible after the fact, but he wouldn't have told me that stuff unless it seemed like I was normalizing it through this kind of light laughter.
Which he
it's
needs.
not that I find it funny.
I want to interview him after your interview.
You can
Find
watch
out what
the
he
movie.
thought
Yeah,
about
you
you.
can find him. I mean, well, he saw the movie after I made it. The movie is free on YouTube, by the way, if any of you want to watch it.
It's called Acquaintances. And
It has an 8.9 on IMDb, and if we get enough listeners, you guys can ruin that. Because
I won't send out the link then.
no, I mean, I think there's like nine votes. So
Dan has an IMDb entry.
yeah, I have a couple credits, but yeah, the film just turned 10 years old. a couple months ago, because the only ever public screening was in August. We had a little screening at the apartment. Ron showed up. I did not know Alex at the time, or else I would have sent out an invite. But anyway, yeah, there's a lot of nervous, or not really.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of functional. There's a lot of lulls, right? Like, because a lull isn't a real laugh. When you type lull, you're not actually lulling, but you're saying
sometimes.
Sometimes, but I find very rarely does my lull actually reach the audible sound space, right? It's always more kind of a way, because if you just say okay or K to somebody over and over
Yeah,
again,
it's flat.
Right, it's flat. It's kind of saying like your comment was not worthy of some kind of judgment.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't have the approval of an LOL.
So there's two things. There's the LOL and the OK. I do use OK as sometimes intentionally kind of neutral, and sometimes it's a little dismissive, or like I'm not dismissive, but like I'm not going to follow up with this. I'm not going to spend the emotional energy in trying to follow up, because I might feel like irked, I might be angry, but I don't want to have this conversation. Sometimes it means like, okay, but so I'll actually use exclamation marks as a way.
Yep.
So I said just now, okay, not a big thing. I wasn't saying like, okay, but on in a text message, I would put in the exclamation mark, because if I don't put the exclamation mark, it does sound dismissive. With the LOLs, I never do LOL. So when I write ha 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 ha, or ha ha, or whatever, because I know if I've actually laughed, and so I'm putting on the laughter, but LOL doesn't seem to capture it. Then I don't feel the laughter when I get LOL. Because like, did you really laugh out loud? Because I'm imagining a laugh out loud means a big guffaw. You were like, oh my god, that's hilarious. Yeah. That's laughing out loud.
That's not what that acronym means.
Yeah. I guess
that's what it literally represents, but that's not its connotation.
Yeah, it doesn't mean you've actually laughed out loud.
Right, and so to give it a personal touch, I always I record a distinct version, a little audio snippet of me going he every time someone sends me something that I find mildly amusing on the internet, so that they know that I care about them.
Yeah, you just send a link instead of LOL. You just send like a bit.ly/LOL.
Did you notice that
it takes them to that audio clip? You could do that like tomorrow.
If you guys,
LOL might be taken, especially now that I said it. But
if you want a special nominee themed answering machine message, here you go. Ha 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 lol.
So sorry, I ruined it by actually lolling.
Ron, we're gonna have to film it again.
Dan just
the
logged.
Actual versus the virtual.
Wait, say that again. The actual versus the virtual.
And the virtual at the same time.
That's some sort of Marshall McLuhan stuff, isn't it?
Yo, that's some meta.
That's what happens when you hear somebody say "lol" while someone's actually laughing. Right?
So you threw in. You said Lovecraft. You want
Lovecraft?
Yeah. Well, wait a second. I say so. Close Encounters. Okay, so we're gonna go back.
Should we say Lolcraft?
Yeah. Ooh. I see what you did there.
Which direction are we trying to go with this?
No, but so you had something more to say about Lovecraft, or you were just
like you guys agree? There's a lot more psychology or psychosis.
Not
psychosis.
Anyways,
it's more Lovecraftian than sci-fi. It's not really about the aliens and the spacecraft.
Once you asked me early on in the movie, you asked me, "Did you read the Call of Cthulhu?" And as soon as yes, I immediately I knew exactly what you were talking about, and yes, this is Call of Cthulhu.
All the visions and everything.
Yeah, but with a happy ending.
With a happy ending, right? So it's a bit of a reverse. So and actually, John Michael Greer has also flipped the script on Lovecraft. He's written some books where the protagonist and the antagonist are reversed. Instead of the diverse cast being the cultists, they're actually the normal ones. They're pursuing some interesting visions and evidence that has come to them, whereas the rationalists are shutting them down and trying to prevent. They're authoritarian and they're trying to prevent truth from being found out. Maybe some entities from beyond our time and space being contacted. So in this one, again, the rationalists, the people in the white lab coats, are against the people with the intuitive experience.
Well,
which again mirrors kind of the UFO thing. I agree. At the end, they kind of make peace and they dance together. Though in reality, with the entire setup and hey, we were prepared to sleeping gas you. He should have been locked up the moment they saw him. He wouldn't have been welcomed by a Frenchman onto a spaceship.
But it turns out they actually all believed that something is going to happen. They were actually trying to not put a damper on it, a lockdown on it. What they were trying to.
They weren't.
They were trying to.
Literally was locked down.
Yeah, no, they were trying to keep. They tried to keep everyone away because they know there is something going on here. I mean, they build that little mini compound
because they're scared. But again, it's not the only response, right? Again, there's one quick shot in this film in India where 1,000 people are singing along. So there's more than one way for a society to handle this. In ours, the elites will wall it off from everyone else as soon as they figure out what's going on.
Right. Heroic individual thing, right? Whenever we see Americans, it's about their being themselves in opposition to society. The only time when we see people in other countries, and granted part of that is, when you're living in the imperial center of the world, anytime you acknowledge that other countries exist, it's some kind of progressive, oh yes, I acknowledge these people exist, and you can't really get around that in 70s movies.
Yeah.
But we don't see an individual. We see this giant mass in unison.
In the India scene.
Yeah, in the India scene.
In Mongolia, we have an
we never see him
individual with
again.
a camel. Right.
Oh, right, that's true.
Right.
And I'm not saying it's an accurate depiction of India either, but I'm saying, imagine, some tribe somewhere that, has room for the esoteric, has room for the spiritual. One guy can start yelling about pyramids, and that's okay. He can make one out of sand and get it out of his system, and he doesn't have to go insane and lose his family.
Well, and that's a really interesting point too about something weirdly antisocial about the United States, in that schizophrenia, when it tends to, I don't know if I'm using I know schizophrenia is a very commonly misused word, but basically unwanted voices in one's head, particularly the kind that tell you to do things.
Well, the auditory hallucinations are a symptom of, I think it's paranoid schizophrenia. The term paranoid is misleading a bit.
Yeah, mission-oriented auditory hallucinations.
But it's not just that. I think, so any kind of psychosis, that could be psychosis can be part of a number of things, but that's neither here nor there. Your point,
in Scandinavian countries, they find a much lower incidence of, the voices are telling you to do things, and the voices can tell you to do, any number of things. It's usually this sort of soup of whatever you absorb from the outside, I would guess. It's far more prevalent in the United States for the voices to tell the person to do something violent, antisocial, that they need to sort of regain control by taking agency from others in some kind of dramatic spectacle.
Isn't that what our heroes do in the movies? I wonder where that notion came from.
And so that I guess that was.
So I'm curious.
It's like the Cthulhu. It's got all these tentacles, right? And it could just as easily give you the best bear hug ever as it could eat you alive.
In this movie, it'll give you the bear hug,
right?
The music is happy, so we think it's like a good thing. We actually have other than the fact that the boys came back and they didn't age, we have no idea. I mean, and they seem to not be immediately
that's true.
traumatized. We actually have no idea what they do, if they have a good time, if they're fed, or they're just like suspended animation for 50 years and then brought back.
We also have no idea why they were abducted.
Probes.
We don't know that.
They also took like dozens of people, and like, why did they only go back and just take one? Like, if you had a sampler, don't you want to get like the full entree next? Like,
but we have, they took dozens of people over decades, and we have no idea why they did that. They took the planes and they dropped them in a desert. They took a ship and then they dropped them in the desert. Decades later, we have no idea why they did that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I assume it's so. Like, the funny thing about the ship, right, is like clearly it didn't come from where they dropped it
because it's in the Gobi Desert, right?
Yeah. So then you're like, well, probably the aliens, aren't keeping track of like latitude and longitude. The Earth has spun around on its axis, has revolved around the sun.
They're definitely keeping track of longitude.
But apparently they know longitude and latitude. And the reason I threw out that this was bullshit when we were watching the movie is that the 104 whatever that puts you in Wyoming is based on a line of 0 that goes through Greenwich. How would they know that our 0 goes through Greenwich?
My two-part question is, and Alex, I know the answer to part 2 from you already, but that's beside the point. So one, do you believe that there is? Do you think that's the important way? Do you think that there is extraterrestrial life out there? And 2, do you think that it's possible to make contact with them? I guess then possible to make contact, and then 3, can they actually come here or we go there?
Yes, no.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I said 2-part question, and I inserted one in the middle, so I knew that you would say 3, no to 3. But that's because of a story that we had, or a book that we had read. Oh, I only read the first,
That's
couple
because
of
of Stars Reach. Let's do another plug for John Michael Greer.
Oh, it is the same guy. I was guessing it was, but I didn't know. Okay.
I have no culture. I've read one thing in my entire life.
Hey, I haven't read anything for I don't know how
book.
long.
Ron actually didn't finish reading that book, so he can't even say.
But I really liked it, and I kept.
That wasn't the reason that I don't think we're gonna go meet them. It's just like it takes $10,000 to put 1 pound of anything into space. Like that's pricey. Try going to Antarctica first.
Oh, but I thought part of it was just well, first the limit of light speed.
There's also that. That's a real problem. Nothing near us has anything interesting.
Yeah.
Mars, dead rock.
Right.
Venus, hot dead rock.
Yeah.
Well, I think also
Mercury, half hot, half frozen dead rock.
With the communication question, like the only kind of played out scenarios that we've been able to witness of 2 species coming into direct contact and communicating in some form, it's pretty much without exception. If it's a positive communication, one of the things has to be domesticated by the other thing. Mm-hmm. If it's a negative interaction, where there's still at least some kind of thing that could be called communication as opposed to just the things being in the same area. Yeah, it's either like a bear attacks somebody or you get your dog to stop pissing on the floor. There doesn't seem to be a lot of other models of interspecies interaction.
Sorry, finish what you're saying.
And so, I believe that I don't necessarily think that we're going to outrace ecological catastrophe, or at least within the next 15 to 20 years, any kind of space travel stuff is going to look like very expensive bullshit that's besides the point, because there's going to be much bigger problems we're all dealing with. So if we do get contacted, it would be the other species. The other question is, if aliens did come here, why would they specifically talk to humans? I mean, I guess beyond the fact that we're obviously the dominant species and that we've, taken up so much space and built all this stuff, but it is kind of interesting that in this movie, like, they don't show any interest in, there's a couple million species worth of things on the Earth. The only thing they're interested in meeting is the guy who directed the 400 Blows and the guy who would eventually play the psychiatrist in What About Bob?
I can't believe that's Bob Balaban's entire career boils down to What About Bob?
Yeah, Richard Dreyfuss,
I'm sorry,
Richard Dreyfuss, he was in this movie.
That movie is ruined for me now.
Sorry, not Bob Balaban, Richard Dreyfuss. Richard Dreyfuss, long storied career. Not it was a fun movie, but that's the pull.
Well, he was in Krippendorf's Tribe too, right?
Oh my God, I can't believe that's your second.
Well, my dad used to, so when everybody was getting rid of their VHS tapes, he would buy, like, when he was kind of depressed at the time, my parents were getting along so great, so he would buy, like, whatever VHS tapes they hadn't sold at the record store or whatever in bulk from them. He'd just, like, grab a pile of whatever and just be like, what kind of deal can you give me on this? And they just wanted this shit out of there, so they'd be like, $5 for you, buddy, you'll take the crap. And so, yeah, I remember seeing a lot of these VHS, and Krippendorf's Tribe was definitely one where we had just this like VHS laying around for years. What else was he in, though?
Well, he was in Jaws, for starters. He was in The Goodbye Girl. I'm looking at like examples. The Goodbye Girl, Mr. Holland's
Opus.
Not Opus. Thank you.
That's a Bloom County movie, right?
What? Oh, Stand By Me. He was the guy that's writing. He was the Stephen King character.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyways, so yeah, but no, yeah, and I guess then what about Bob and the Krippendorf's Tribe? So
well, I mean, what about Bob?
And 120 other films.
U.S. cinema peaked at What About Bob, and it's been at like kind of a steady downward trajectory since What About Bob.
Until Bachelorette came out.
Right.
Yeah.
And then it started another downward trajectory after that slight blip.
Right.
It also sounds like American energy production. It
what?
seems to correlate quite well.
Yeah, well, I mean, what about
peaked in oil production in like right around when this around when this movie came out, American pumped oil.
Maybe we need to watch What About Bob?
The thing that I found most fascinating about Stars Reach, how many books or movies or anything do you know that takes place in a world where we don't go to the stars, but we are limited to communicating with aliens, right? So everyone's all up about the spaceships and whatever. That's its own analogy for the Wild West or whatever. I don't know what it is.
But instead,
so
like,
that's
the aliens
the interesting
slide
thing.
up in your DMs.
They what?
The aliens, they slide up in your DMs.
It's I mean,
try to sound hip to the kids.
Yeah,
What's
no, I get it. A direct
message.
The constraints are very real.
Thinking,
You have light speed as your limit. So, like, if you're talking to someone 10 light years away, you send a message, you better think through that message real good, because, like, you're not getting a response for another 20 years.
Not if you fold space.
So, it's like, given known technology. So, like, the other thing I like about Stars Reach is it's incredibly ordinary. Using technology we have today, you could, if we found one, I didn't say, like, definitely we will talk to an alien.
Right,
I'm saying, you'd said, can we? Sure, eventually, in theory, maybe, if you've maintained a really large telescope into the forthcoming collapse of the American Empire, like, which may be a struggle, which again is what puts the, fiction into Stars Reach, is like that this actually was pulled off instead of everything that's there harvested for its useful materials. But so, like, and it's not the main subject. It's like just kind of a fan feature. So like they're able to communicate. Wait, to communicate with aliens, but it's a struggle. Like they have to figure out the language, and it might be a good place to start by not just telling dogs what to do, but actually communicate with some of the intelligent species we have all around us. The crows that are reported to have sewn with spider's web.
Whoa.
And, like, made shit. The chimpanzees that aren't that dumb, the dolphins, the squid, the pigs that we like to eat.
Yeah, the depressing thing about it is that we can talk but not meet.
The depressing thing for those Americans that have the notion that it is our God-given right to go to the stars is that we can talk but not speak. Given 2019, we live in a world where we have not spoken to a goddamn alien at all ever.
No, but the message might arrive tomorrow.
Given that we're in a world where we haven't even spoken to them, you would think there might be some excitement about speaking.
Oh, yeah. No. So we speak.
But there isn't.
but actually,
you're upset that we don't get to touch.
Right, exactly. It's like, hey, what's the message? What's the message? Oh, yeah, I'm never gonna see you. Oh,
that's pretty amazing. You got a message.
Oh yeah, no, it's totally amazing. There's something out there. There's somebody out. There's somebody's out there. Wow, and we could talk to them. And it's wonderful. Great, let's have a conversation. And then wait, we can't actually have this conversation. It's really a one-way. Right. So okay,
it goes both ways.
It goes both ways. So we have the conversation, and we're talking like, great, let's meet up. Let's. So we're finally going to have the date. And like, oh no, we're never going to have a date. Sorry, this is all. We're talking on Tinder, but we're never actually going to meet up in person. And it's not just and sadly,
I know, but like that's not. It's like better than like not having any matches on Tinder ever, which is an experience I am familiar with.
Oh yeah,
hey,
with
I've
my
had
phone,
3.
I don't even know what Tinder is.
You can do it on the computer, but you don't want to waste your time on it.
You can?
Yes.
Well, I'm in a
it.
relationship, so I don't.
Well, that's your problem.
Yeah.
You can also, maybe discuss with your partner that you want to, swipe on Tinder for science. But anyways, it's like it's possible.
For science, quote unquote.
No, for actual science, gathering evidence. Does anyone ever match with my ugly face?
Will anybody match?
No.
Will anybody match with me? If we match, will they actually want to meet? If we actually meet,
do they exist? Can we talk? Can we touch?
Right.
Well, I had an
No.
Cupid for like 6 years, and I got to the point where I literally replaced because they ask you those 8 questions in the front page, and I replaced every answer I had with just number 2.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what's the first thing people notice about you? Number 2.
Yeah.
What's and I got more messages with that than I got with like an honest description of myself. But I don't know if that I'm really selling myself here.
Who is number 1?
Right.
You are number 6.
See,
it's actually a job description. The job description is you could be his number 1.
Have you seen?
He'll be number 2.
Have you seen The Prisoner?
No.
Number 2 is a job description. You're right.
Yeah. I mean, there was another point where they ask you like, what are the 3 things you couldn't live without?
Yeah.
And I looked it up, and I think it's like 3/4 of my liver, 1 of my kidneys.
Your entire digestive tract?
Right. I didn't even think of the digestive tract. So
part of your circulatory system, your brain.
Wait. I don't have my entire original digestive tract.
Well, you'd need most of it.
Well, yeah, I say most of it. I do have most of it, but part of it was taken away.
Well, I was just looking at donation stuff, so I was like, all right, I can get away with 1 kidney. I don't really need my pancreas. Or no, I need my pancreas, but I don't need, what is it, the gallbladder? You don't really need that. That's
you can do fine with only 2 chambers of the heart.
Yeah, I don't need my tonsils.
You're a fish.
What?
You're a fish.
And I don't know, like
There's
for some reason women
4.
weren't turned on by like a picture of me in clown makeup and a frank discussion of the limits of organ donation. And that's not on me because like I brought it, I brought it.
If you don't want to know the true Dan, then you don't get to know Dan.
Yeah, I mean, and I got both kidneys. Like, you're not like coming to me with like parts missing or some of the packaging ripped up. I'm not in the bargain bin.
Wait, if I ever need a kidney,
packaging is still on.
I got all my liver.
If I ever need
both
a kidney,
kidneys, it's hot.
Comes with batteries included. All right, batteries come with this toy.
All right.
I mean, I'm not mint in the box, but I've been loved.
Wait.
At least once. Or so he claims.
Right, as David Letterman topped his top 10 list with the day after his first child was born, there is now tangible proof I am not a virgin. That was the number 1 thing that he liked about having a baby. That was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't think I was alive when that was on TV.
There's tangible proof. What's his name? Roy?
Roy. Yeah.
There's tangible proof Roy is not a virgin, to the best of our knowledge.
Yeah, unless those aren't his kids.
Yeah, we don't know that for certain, right?
Maybe that's why he's so distant.
Oh, there's not his biological children.
Anyways, so he gets some visions. I guess my point with the Cthulhu thing is that, like, maybe we shouldn't look at it as though he's crazy, but, like, the dozen people that are in the helicopter have maybe had legitimate experiences, but the society that they're in, its emphasis on conformity makes them crazy. They become crazy because they aren't quote unquote normal. Maybe that experience could have been integrated into society better. And then there's the clear power separation of like, no. Let the experts have it. Even though at least the French guy is like into the actual real. So like the French guy's the only scientist on the set. Right? He is interested in the evidence, which is what science is supposed to be about. Not about, oh, we already know what this is or what this isn't. He's interested in those guys because they actually bring something to the table. Everyone else is just wearing a lab coat and plays the piano.
I mean, there's some like amazing reel-to-reel tape recorder porn in this movie.
Oh my god. I don't know.
Like,
if you're into that, I don't know how you...
Yeah, remember
this
is the 70s. Yeah, just so this is the 70s. So we've got like the computers. They're giant computers. Well, actually, no. Maybe I don't know if they're computers, but there's the recording. Wait. Got to finish description so people know. There's the recording devices are these giant reel-to-reel tapes. We've got the cameras. We don't have like tiny little video cameras. They're these big, film cameras. What we see is the cameras that the individual civilians use are these little cheap 35 millimeter wind up things. So now what were you going to say? I just want to make sure that people see what we were seeing.
Oh, so the way that data...
The government brings lots of them.
Yeah.
So like audio tape was a very common method of data storage in the early days of computers before they mastered optical discs. There's a lot of... I think one of the Captain America Marvel movies, they have just a shot of like basically because a reel-to-reel recorder was the quickest way to access the data. You don't get random like rapid access like you do with optical media. But so a lot of those, it was hard to tell which devices were actually recording the audio from the alien encounter and which ones were essentially just like, I'm guessing most of them would have been recorded because there's no reason you would put storehouses of like backed up data into this compound you're building for one specific event.
It's just a movie. At some point, halfway through, it's like the mothership comes, they start playing music, they start a jam session, and like halfway through, there's some guy who's like, okay, start recording. Really, bro?
Yeah, why did they...
Really? We've been watching Aliens right now for 15 minutes. You didn't fire this thing up last week? Like, come on. Just set it to loop.
Right,
you know?
It's like one of those Grateful Dead bootlegs where it starts in the middle of Uncle John's band and you don't know how long they've been playing.
No, wait a second. Those reels were computer. It was the computer stuff because they were playing on a keyboard. That's how they were communicating the music. It wasn't off of that. That was part of the computer. Because then when they start actually having the jam session, that's no longer mechanical. It switches over and becomes automatic. It's not human. It's electronic.
They keep yelling at the kid to play the notes. So
but he stops at one point. And the machine takes over.
I thought so. We see a shot of the keyboard's keys being pressed without humans pressing them. I thought that was the aliens influencing the keys.
Yeah, it was the
conversation.
conversation.
That was a pre-recording?
Yeah, because they switch over. I don't know if it was pre-recording. I think there was it was the computer actually doing some sort of translation. It's a science fiction movie. The computers can do that.
In 77, they had machine learning where like the machine just figured out how to talk to the aliens.
Very simple. Like,
wait. We think that's the Hollywood version.
Hold on. You're talking reality. This is movie reality. This is science fiction.
Do you think that's actually what the movie meant to portray? Because I think that would be out.
That's exactly what I think it means to portray.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, and I think though, because we've seen in the movie, like the movie literally starts with the aliens showing that they have the capacity to control electronics remotely. So,
but then how are
you can see what I'm saying, or which one did you think when you?
No, well, then why did they?
I thought that so they got all these guys with cameras lined up. I thought it was a reel-to-reel recorder attached to some kind of external microphone that would have been outside the building. What I thought he was doing was hitting record so that they would get a recording of all of what went on. I didn't think it was a playback like that. At least if I understood.
I wasn't saying it was a playback. I said it was real time. It was real time learning, or it was figuring out. It was doing the translation. If
like the computer had figured out what they were saying.
The computer was figuring out, because otherwise, what's the point of having the big giant lights and flashing back and having all the notes and all the colors and all that, as opposed to just let's just have the speakers. We'll blast that out, and they were
those were
recording.
for us.
No, but you can't run a program off of magnetic tape storage. That would need to go into something with faster random access storage. Not that Steven Spielberg.
Well, again, so Ron is saying it's a
that.
Hollywood,
Right?
Yeah. Most people don't have access to a computer. They haven't seen one firsthand. This is 77, and granted, the programming was probably done with punch cards. Well, let me think. 77. I used computers in 1980, 1981. In 81, I was using punch cards. I was in 5th grade. I did this.
So the government may have just started to move off of it.
Yeah, there were
the
keyboards.
defense industry was leading.
It wasn't just because there was the punch card programming, and there was also some using keyboard. I think if I'd stayed in the next year's class, actually had keyboards, but it was still, the punch cards were the main way.
Oh wait, that actually makes a ton of sense, because I was wondering, why did they only start recording after the music had started?
Right. And the recording, we see the recording devices. There's people standing outside along with the cameras. They're standing outside holding microphones.
Okay, yeah, and the idea that you'd be running some kind of automated program to communicate, that makes way more sense than what I thought was going on.
Yeah, it didn't make much sense otherwise. Like, why? Yeah, I don't know. So, okay. I never really thought about that particular thing and the whole thing before. Yeah, so they had a supercomputer in there. Because only a supercomputer can handle it. Now we have the supercomputers in our pockets. Or I'm holding one in my hand.
I've taken mine out of my pocket.
Right. I mean, this supercomputer in my hand, the smartphone probably has more processing power. By far, it can handle a lot more than that. Okay, it doesn't have machine learning.
It might have a little.
But yeah.
Because you can
train
it on your voice, I think.
Yeah, Alexa. That's how we train Alexa a little bit and teach it.
I still have to crumple up punch cards and jam them into the charge port of this phone.
Has that?
That's how vintage my phone is.
Has that impaired your charging?
I would know if I check my messages.
Do you have an infrared blaster on the front of that phone?
No, that's a headphone jack, which does not work.
I see. That explains it. Maybe because you put a punch card in there.
Very possibly.
Yeah, you're gonna.
But you know what? What's technologically advanced about this phone, and it advances it above any other option that I could buy right now. I can take the back off and change out the battery whenever I want, and that is the definition of Dan privilege.
Yeah, my phone, you're not supposed to. It's designed not to take, not to replace the battery. Alex, actually, I bought a battery, and Alex was kind enough to replace it.
At no charge, ladies and gentlemen.
At no charge. First month's free.
Yeah, try and get him hooked on that battery replacement plan. And actually, when I was looking for getting myself a phone, that was one of my criteria, which made my life very simple, because suddenly there were 4 cellular devices that were an option. I was like, I can take out the battery. It's also a second simple reason to have that criteria. If you drop it into water, boom, pop out the battery, you have a decent chance of drying it off and bringing it back to life.
Although I dropped my phone a while back, I accidentally jumped in the pool with it because I had the phone in my
pocket.
In my pocket. That's the downside of having a swimsuit that has pockets in it, is you put your phone in there.
Be careful.
So I jumped into, but the rice, the trick of putting in a bag filled with rice and waiting a little bit, it worked. The phone was fine.
So actually, Lifehacker did a little test about this, and they said that it's not any better than just leaving it out. Because if you put it in rice, you then maybe cover the bag, and it's you don't get air circulation.
Oh, okay.
Rice only holds so much, only sucks so much water out of the air, but just leaving it out, the regular passage of air over it will get it to dry off.
So you know what I did that worked?
So you can also leave it in the sun if it doesn't bake too hard.
When I was a kid, it wasn't a smartphone. It was like a Nokia something or other, and I put it through the wash by accident because it was in my pants. I took the battery out because you could do that easily back in the day because I'm old. And
you're younger than me,
right?
I'm
the young one here, 25.
I figured people are going to be listening to this 10 years from now because I'm an egoist, but
I'll still be 25.
Keep dreaming.
He'll still be 25. I put a couple layers of paper towel around it so that it wouldn't get damaged. Taped it shut, like not tape around all of it, but just enough so the paper towel would stay there. And I put it through the dryer for 10 minutes. It was good.
Really?
Yeah.
The dryer!
I put it through the dryer.
You took out the battery and then dryer.
Yeah, I took out, because you keep the battery in there and then that'll blow up or something.
Yeah, that's the speed version. I like to be gentle. I put it out in the sun and just like
you
let it chill.
You took this advanced piece of technology and put it in just a bunch of heat and rolling around.
Well,
drying it. Yeah.
Well, yeah. No, so
that's
what it takes.
It was my only way to play Snake, but that was a risk I was willing to take.
Yeah, you could use a blow dryer to similar effect.
Probably, yeah. I mean, you can...
the key is just not to get too hot, because there is a temperature that ruins your LCD.
Right, but we'll fix your Xbox 360, because if your Xbox 360 stopped working, it's because Microsoft designed it so it would get hot enough where the board would bend, and you just unbend the board, put it in the oven for like 10 minutes, put it back in the case, and 9 times out of 10 it'll work. If you're scared of that, just like literally go at it with a blow dryer for a couple minutes and see if it works. It probably will work. And you can probably get one for, I mean, that's like one of the great, I don't personally like it as a console, but if you want one for dirt cheap, the only better trick I know to get video game consoles for dirt cheap is just look for one where the HDMI port doesn't work. Because 99% of the time it's just like the person was drunk or impatient, wiggled the thing way too much. You just open the back of it, reflow the solder, or replace the port.
Just reflow the solder, ladies and gentlemen.
That's all it takes. Well, I know there's 3 people in this room, and 2 of them can definitely do that.
Yeah, my soldering game, as I recently discovered in attempting to fix a monitor, my soldering game needs work.
So the monitor only half works?
The monitor works, but like if you leave it plugged in and the computer goes on standby, it like won't turn back on. It's kind of funny. Okay. But then I was emboldened. I was like, you know what? I can solder shit. So I was so my mom dropped her timer into the sink full of water. I immediately pop it open, take out the battery. I'm like, you know what? Let's dry this off fast. I take off the screws. I leave it open. And then I'm going to reassemble it. And as I'm reassembling it, I rip one of the 2 wires that I need to not rip. It goes to the positive end of the battery, and then I pull out the soldering iron again, and I'm like, but all I have is like a soldering gun, which is like pumps 100 watts of power into this enormous tip. It's basically a fire hose when you're trying to do something a little bit more detailed, you know? And so it's a fire hose of heat. And I'm just like trying to, I'll use some finesse, and I'm just like, boop, and it melts the blob of solder that's there. I don't have any other solder, and like manages to melt the lead into the solder, and it works to this day. Cool. That was a proud moment of mine.
So you did it. So first time was
maybe I can solder.
First time was practice. Second time was the real thing.
Yeah, this was like Indiana Jones MacGyvering it. Like, oh my god, it worked.
You know what might work is practicing on stuff that's not this sensitive advanced technology.
Yeah. Usually. Well, so there. Yeah. So I should have quit while I was ahead. I shouldn't have like ripped it apart as much as I did. I gentler on the way back, but
I used to use a soldering iron.
And actually, the scene in the beginning also parallels what I'm talking about with conformity. Right? Is like, do you want to report a UFO? No. Do you want to report a UFO? No. Do you want to file any report? No. Right? So again, they've seen things with their own eyes, and they don't want to say anything. And so wouldn't that be uncourageous? Right? If you're thinking courage is a virtue, right? The 12 people that end up in a helicopter, they have a lot of fucking courage, considering the conformity that they're up against. Whereas the fancy pilots flying the plane, they're comfortable. They don't want they don't want to rock the boat. They're doing okay, I guess. I think pilots were paid well then, and maybe had pensions. What's a pension? Dan doesn't know. I don't know.
Pension? That's that's
an arcane term for taking care of people.
I don't know what a pension is.
Oh no.
We need to go back another generation. I told Alex that the whole thing will take about 6 to 7 hours, and we're closing in on 7 hours. So, yeah. Good.
Ron predicted the future.
I did.
It's possible. It's
Yeah.
possible.
He's going to be contacted when they come.
So I don't know what you guys thought about the whole courage versus conformity thing.
Yeah, no, I think that's that's definitely a valid point, and that's
I
probably
guess
much
it's highlighted, but maybe
closer to
not
what
intentional.
Spielberg was probably actually thinking when he was making the movie.
You think so?
I think he tends to think of things, at least from what I've seen in his other movies, in those kinds of... He has a very simple moral universe in his head.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of why his movies are so appealing and comforting. And so the idea of setting this up is the courage to stand out and be yourself versus conforming to what society expects out of you. I can totally see him thinking that. And honestly, you could even reduce Schindler's List to that if you're not just going to call it a white savior narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Which I did on a previous episode.
Yeah.
I'm just trolling people to get a 10. No.
Right.
I don't believe that about the
Listen,
film,
whatever
but-
gere hits, man.
No, we already lost a bunch of listeners because of what he said about Schindler's List. We lost
You actually did.
listeners for no, we were saying we're going to lose a lot of listeners for this one, and then 30 minutes later, I don't remember what we said, and we said, okay, we're going to lose listeners for that one, and by the end, there's no listeners left.
Well, the aliens are a metaphor for our listening audience,
Right.
because I am sure they are out there. I can't communicate with them, but someday they will touch down. There might even be 20 or 30 of them that come out.
Right? Can you
Because that's
imagine?
what the
You've
conditions
studied their most refined forms of art. It's some sort of combination of music and visual that is actually so just like Tinder. Before they want to meet you in person, maybe they just want to chat for a little bit. Feel you out, get the vibe.
And maybe they will find them, because we're on a lot of different streaming podcast services.
Yeah.
Do you want to list those, Ron?
No.
Do you even know what they are?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know what they are.
Also-
I found out we had
Yeah,
we will do it with the sign off, I feel right?
Let's see. We're on Spotify. We're on YouTube. We're on Google Play Music, and we're on another one that's really popular. Whose name will not. We're in Libsyn. Libsyn is where it's actually where it's hosted, which also has the Anomany.com. Oh, and now we have a new domain name, questionablemovies.com. Since
Wow.
Anomany, not everybody knows how to spell Anomany yet.
Nobody.
There's still 3 or 4 people out there, including Alex.
So for them, you got this spellable.
So Alex, just for you, questionablemovies.com, because the full name is Anomany Questionable Movies.
So,
Sounds good. There's actually one more way that you can hear this podcast. So if you're one of those people in the white lab coats with the huge bank of computers, if you point high gain microphone at a certain window in a certain city, you can hear this podcast being produced live, uncut, with all the spoilers and sex jokes.
So somebody's listening, and then they realize they don't want to.
Right. Then you'll be like, oh, you'll find a new appreciation for the editing of the podcast. Yeah.
Thank you.
If you didn't want to get it raw, if you want the more refined version.
I just want to say thank you, Alex, for coming on. I know it's a bit of a hike, right? It's you had to take the train in. Did you bike too? You had your bike, yeah.
I biked to the train, took the train to a streetcar, took the streetcar down to the nearest station, and then biked from there.
So what was the total? How much time did it take total?
Oh Jesus! So I got here at 12:30. I left my house at 11:15.
Wow.
Oh, okay.
So that's real. So we really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thanks for coming out.
I have evening plans too.
Oh, okay. Here? I hope in the area.
In Somerville.
Oh, okay. All right.
So riding the All
right. Well, that's I really appreciate it.
I paired it up, but yeah, it was
it's been a lot of fun, and I want to say that when we talked about this, and we said you said come on the podcast, and you said you'll bring the popcorn, and you did.
You did, yeah, and it was good popcorn.
Alex
locally grown,
and I know
organic popcorn.
For all
from Stearns Farm, ladies and gentlemen.
For all the years I've known Alex is a man of his word.
I also showed up here. I don't know if you noticed this. There were 0 texts before I was on your porch.
Right. And then you sent me the text.
We were like, hey, this is when we're going to do this. And I was like, okay, like 2 days ago, I was like, okay, so my ETA is 12:25 because you guys are in that part of the city. And then there was no further updates. Are you coming? Yes, I'm coming. Are we still on? Until I texted Ron that I was on his porch.
Yeah, or on Dan's porch.
Well, specifically, he said, call me when you're here if the door's locked. I inspected the locking of the door. It was fully locked, and so I rang.
Yeah. The doorbell doesn't work.
No, rang you
call
on the phone.
Rang phone. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow,
Phones
that's
ring.
Yeah. Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
Wow, I haven't heard anybody use the word ring in a very long time.
You also don't dial phone numbers anymore.
I do not. That is true.
Right? You press them. You don't dial.
Right.
Dial is wrong.
Yeah. Beep, beep, beep. That's the busy. Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on. So now we can.
Thank you for having me.
And so this has been Anomany. This is still Dan.
This is Ron.
And our guest,
Alex.
Alex, the Podvisitor. Right?
Yeah, the
Podvisitor.
visitor
From another land.
Yeah.
From the visitor.
All right. Well, take care, everyone.
Technically, I'm a citizen
Oh,
Of the podcast.
of the podcast.
of this land, but I wasn't when I was born.
Well, Anomany has declared sovereignty separate from the larger United States. I was going to tell you about that later on, but yeah, no. So there's two. You can get dual citizenship.
Okay.
But we'll get into that next episode.
Okay. All right. Sounds good.
See you later.
Yeah, everyone, you have something to look forward to. We're going to find out about Anomany's sovereignty. All right. Take care, everyone.